Welcome to Breaking the News. Plus, on this Wednesday night, we're going to dive into a hyper-local story that's going on in Minneapolis right now that's gotten a lot of interest. And we're going to start talking about this from the mass shooting that happened at an encampment on private property around 48 hours ago. And to talk about this, Lou Raguse, one of our investigative reporters here at CARE. So let's set the stage. There's a mass shooting in a parking lot that's been functioning as an encampment with the blessing of the person who owns the parking lot, right?
Yes, and so the story has been in the news already because It was controversial that this property owner gave permission and basically hosted a homeless encampment on his private property with up to 75 people there at any given time coming and going.
Property's on East Lake Street,
Yep.
And it's owned by Hamoudi Sabri.
Hamoudi Sabri, he's a developer in Minneapolis, well-known. His brother is also a well-known developer who owns the Carmel Mall in Minneapolis. And his brother had controversy about 10 years ago or so when he was convicted of bribing a Minneapolis city council member, spent time in prison. His brother, Hamoudi, was not affiliated with that, and the brother is not affiliated with this.
Right.
But they are both...
If the name sounds familiar.
Yes, they are both well-known figures as developers in the Twin Cities.
Right, and close by because the Carmel Mall also on Lake Street, East Lake Street, and this particular encampment that's on Hamoudi's property, East Lake Street. So let's focus on this. So it feels like a couple of months now, Hamoudi has allowed unsheltered people to have an encampment on his property, and the city has been pushing back, right?
Yes. The city obviously takes the stance that they don't allow or condone encampments because of safety reasons. And so when this began, they started issuing citations for the obvious trash and drug paraphernalia that's left everywhere, the lack of bathroom facilities, spoiled food, things like that. Basically all kind of like health-related concerns that they can cite him with. And they issued at least a dozen, I believe, of those to no avail. And then about a week ago, they gained approval from the city council to file a lawsuit in order to essentially get a judge to put an end to it is what they want.
On this private property owner's site that he's operating. So what has his reason been for having an encampment on his property? He's clearly trying to make a statement.
I did an interview with him yesterday, and so he essentially, he's anti Mayor Jacob Frey administration.
Okay.
And he said that he's also he's Palestinian, so he's a huge supporter of like the Free Palestine movement. Mm-hmm. He says he sees the homeless locally almost like Gaza to him. Okay. And so that's where his emotional connection to it comes from, is what he told me yesterday. And he said the reason he's allowing it then is because he blames the Frey administration for not having a better solution or any solution, in his words, for the people to go. Okay. And now, of course, that's something that in a press conference yesterday, Mayor Jacob Frey contested.
Right. And so that argument between the two, this Jacob Frey and Hamoudi, or the city and Hamoudi, has been going on for several weeks now. But it comes to a tipping point when there's a mass shooting at that encampment, correct?
And so just to paint the picture of the shooting, because I just got new details on that. So police believe it was a drug dispute. There were two people at least firing at each other.
In the encampment?
Yes.
Okay.
Or somebody that came, to the encampment, to somebody that was in, however it played out. 60 rounds were fired.
Okay.
So that's even more than what we thought before. 7 people were hit, including 2 people that were shot in the head. At least one of them is still in critical condition, and they call it grave condition, which is where they may not survive. It'd be lucky to survive. At least one bullet hit the school, a window of the school right next door. There's a charter school right there when you go and look, there's a children's playground right there. And so that really kind of paints a stark picture if you go out to the area and look at it.
Okay. And so after the shooting, did Sabri change his tune at all? Because you said you talked to him yesterday about saying perhaps this isn't the best way to go. Perhaps I should just give up on hosting unsheltered people as an encampment.
No, he's 100% defiant.
Still.
Yes. And the police made it an active crime scene, so they kind of take over control of it. They don't let, even the property owner come on when it's a crime scene, just like any other crime scene. And Hamoudi kind of gathered a lot of the homeless people across the street in a kind of a public space on Lake Street, if you've been there, where they have sometimes like a vegetable market or like a farmer's market there. And they were basically all there, and he was contacting people to get new tents and new belongings for people. And he told me directly, as soon as they give up the crime scene and get the police out of there, we're going back in. And so those were his words to me yesterday. Now, what the city did is expedited the court process by asking for a restraining order. So they're asking a judge to say, on an emergency basis, order him to stop doing that. And so that's what's playing out in court right now.
Okay. And that can happen even on his private property.
Yes, because think of it as a health issue.
Okay.
And we don't know, there's arguments, of course. It's like any court case. But the argument that the city's making is just like you would in any other health issue. Just because it's your private property, you can't do things on your private property that affects the health of others. And they're arguing that it affects the health of the people living there because of the drug use, the spoiled food, the lack of water, the lack of bathroom facilities, the garbage, et cetera. But then also a danger to the neighboring community. And so just like you can't go and do whatever you want in your own backyard if it affects the health of others, that's the argument that they're making why he can't have a homeless encampment.
And because that has been going on for some time, it's not all, when it comes to this tipping point, it's also at what feels like a tipping point in the city of Minneapolis. 4 mass shootings in as many as 3 weeks, 2 of them happening on Lake Street within 48 hours of each other. There's a lot on the plate of the city to make the people of the city feel like it's safe to drive down any street.
And, this shooting happened like 10 o'clock at night, so whatever with that one. But the one that happened just hours earlier was broad daylight in a very busy area where 5 people were shot. That a little further down on Lake Street, right where 35W is, there's a transit station. And what police believe it was an argument between a couple people escalating to where all of a sudden they're shooting at each other. At least 30 shots fired there. 5 people hit. 1 person might not survive, very bad critical condition. So, and then that was just hours before this one over at the encampment. One more note on Mr. Sabri, however, in kind of the heart of the argument over the need for an encampment between him and the mayor. Mm-hmm. So yesterday, the mayor talked about how they do send their homeless response teams there, and they have been doing that. And the people in the encampment are not accepting the services that are being offered. Mm-hmm. And so the mayor is arguing that they are trying to help the people. They're not just kicking them out and pushing them on to the next spot.
Is Sabri helping the people? Because many of the citations he was getting, like no potable water, no restrooms, things like that, other than providing the land, is he helping them in any way?
I think that he's going to argue that he was, but I think that's a contended issue.
Okay.
About how much, food, water, and bathroom facilities, and plus garbage collection, which is a major part of it. So
I'm always trying to figure out the motivation. Is it just, using that idea, he is Palestinian, and to make a statement, is he trying to make a statement about the war, that like this is what it looks like for people in Gaza?
I think he was trying to explain, to me, where his heart is, and he said that he sees the homeless in Minneapolis as an extension of Gaza, where they're not given the rights that he believes they deserve, and they're not being treated with the respect they deserve. So he was equating the two things. Mm-hmm. As somebody who's passionate about that issue, that's why he's passionate about this issue.
I get it.
And also, I think this is another story, which is a major issue, but when you talk about services and housing for the homeless, it's not just talking about a shelter, because there are shelters and they are offered, but that's obviously a temporary solution. And I think the big picture that a lot of people are looking at is how do you find permanent housing? Mm-hmm. And when you have people that are in the depths of deep addiction, how can they handle that?
Right.
And who pays for it, and where is it, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's a major issue that needs to be resolved. And I think that is what Mr. Sabri says needs to be addressed first.
So in the scenario, I know that there is a court case that's kind of working itself out. And in the scenario that the city is able to get what it wants, has Sabri or anyone said what happens to that unsheltered community? Because I live in the city of Minneapolis on the south side, And what happens is people who are unsheltered often remain unsheltered. They just move somewhere else. So it's this game of whack-a-mole with actual human beings. Have they talked about that?
Well, that's kind of what I was alluding to, which is that there have been services offered that are not accepted.
Okay.
And so if they're trying to help and people are not accepting help, that's a quagmire. That's like a problem that they need to figure out. You can't force somebody to do something that they don't want to do.
Absolutely.
And when the drug addiction is this X factor that's affecting all of it, then people are not always thinking with the right minds.
Right.
And so that's the challenge for the city, is to figure out what can we do that people will want to do and will agree to do. And so with Mr. Sabri, he just thinks that there is not enough being done, and those options have not been explored as well as they should.
So as part of his goal here by doing this is kind of forcing the hand of the city. Is that what he believes he's doing?
Yes. His take is that encampments are not a good thing, but they are a necessary thing right now. That's his argument.
Okay, it's almost like a form of protest in a way.
I mean, he's definitely thumbing his nose at the city.
Okay.
There's no question about that.
Okay. And then back to the night of the mass shooting at this encampment. I asked you about if Mr. Sabri was providing any sort of potable water, food, shelter, heat, safe things. What is his response in terms to a shooting on his property at a place he's providing? Does he feel like he has any sort of responsibility to keep the peace, like be the mayor of the encampment that he's authorizing?
I asked him directly, do you feel any responsibility for what happened? And he said, no. Shootings happen. They're going to happen wherever they happen. Unfortunately, it happened here. I mean, he kind of sidestepped the question, saying, no, the city leaders should feel responsibility. I don't feel any responsibility. So controversial answer, I guess I would characterize that.
In your recollection, at least in mine, I can't think of one where this has ever happened before, because this is not happening in a vacuum, right? Because Mr. Sabri also had some land near the North Loop of Minneapolis in the Warehouse District a few years ago.
Yep.
And this went back and
That was
forth.
kind of in the height of the pandemic.
Okay.
And so, and the whole, on the timeline of things, the opioid epidemic really started to rise before the pandemic. So we saw our first major kind of tent cities in Minneapolis a couple years before the pandemic. I think some people kind of grouped the things together. But during the pandemic in 2021, Mr. Sabri allowed people to live on his property in the North Loop, but then the city worked with him and he agreed to put a stop to it.
Yeah, it didn't come to this head that time. He finally agreed. It wasn't the first time, but after some push and pull, he did finally agree to it. But you don't get the sense that he's feeling agreeable this time?
No, and he openly says that. He says, bring it on. I'm honored that they want to sue me for helping the homeless.
And I remember the night of the shooting, Mayor Fry said, if he wants to sue us. We're clearing this encampment. So no give on that side either.
Right. No, and in fact, that's what they're in court right now for.
Whew. So this one definitely not over. Well, Lou, thanks for reporting on this for KARE 11. We
Absolutely.
appreciate it, and coming on the Plus tonight. Thanks for your work, and thank you all for joining us. This has been KARE 11 Plus, Breaking the News Plus.